For now, we know England's ruler is Charles the Third, but who will be monarchs if I was the director of England? Well, let's find out. Of course, it will start with King King William the first Norman ruler, but it will have the hiccup when Henry VI becomes king. Henry VI's son, Edward of Minster, died on May 4, while Henry died on May 21. So meaning Edward's wife, Anne of Deville, will took the throne after Henry VI's death from 1471 until 1485. Now, who will be king consort? It's simple. Richard III will be the king consort since he was her wife, but Edward IV will be written out of name. Normally, Jasper Tudor's brother, Edmund Tudor, was supposed to take the throne, but since Edmund died in 1453, Jasper will be king for about 6 years, from 1485 to 1491 until his death at 64. Now, Henry VII, the the son of Edmund Tudor and the nephew of Jasper Tudor, will take the throne, but not in 1485, in 1491. Let's say Henry VII's son Arthur will take the throne at 5 years old if Henry VII was disposed. The infamous Henry VIII, if Arthur died in 1502, Henry would eventually rule England, and his reign would have shifted to 37 years to 45 years if he had took the throne when he was 10. His queen's consort, Catherine of Aragon, will also take the throne, but the same thing will happen in real history. Their marriage will be annulled, and Henry will still broke with the Roman Church. But in 1547, Henry will die. Instead of Edward taking the throne first, let's put Mary in the throne first. Then a month later, Edward would take the throne in 1457. Now, he would normally reign for 6 years until his death in 1553. Lady Jane Grey would still be the infamous 90s queen, but Jane's father, Henry Grey, Duke of Suffolk, father of Lady Jane Grey, would eventually will take the throne together with his wife Frances Grey, and Mary would have reigned again in 1554. But 4 years later, she will die in 1558. Now Philip II of Spain would rule England if um, if Mary's will to make Philip king. Now, instead of Elizabeth reigning for 44 years because of Philip until his reign in the Spanish Armada and would be defeated by Elizabeth I, she would have only reigned for 16 years. Elizabeth's lover, Robert Dudley, would take the throne, probably. And since he died in 1558, he and Elizabeth would have ruled together. And already in 1603, King James the Sixth would have been, yes, he would be king in real history. His eldest son, Henry Frederick, would be named Henry the Ninth, but he died young. So let's make his reign in 1512, and it will end by his death. Now Charles I would rule in 1625, but he wouldn't be executed in 1649. Instead, he would die of natural causes. Now Charles II would rule. Known as the Merry Monarch, he allowed partying until his death in 1678. James II was not was way different to Charles II of Spain than Charles II of England. He is strict, rigid. Queen Anne would rule to 1701 until 13 years. Instead of ending the Stuart dynasty, she would give the throne to her husband, Prince George of Denmark, will rule. But he died in 1708, and Queen Anne would have a second rule from 1708 to 1714. Now, if I was the director of England, I would write out George the First in his name and his son George the Second. George the Second's wife, Queen Caroline, would take the throne without George having a second term. I will write out George the Third's name and would make his son George the Fourth king. Instead of the fourth, he would be the third. Queen Victoria would rule at 11 years old if if his uncle William the Fourth didn't take didn't take the throne. Queen Victoria would rule at an incredible 71 years, beating the record of Queen Elizabeth II, who ruled for 70 years, instead of Edward and George taking the throne. It would be Tsar Nicholas II. He would rule from 1901 to 1918. He was a Revenant, but he would be executed. King George would rule earlier, and the and he would rule at the age 23 until in 1936 he was greatly surpassed by his brother Edward VIII, but he would also abdicate, giving the throne once more to George until his death in 1952. But in 1952, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, will be Queen Elizabeth II. But instead of uh, instead of his husband being King George VI, he would be King George IV. She would rule her death in 2002, giving the throne to her daughter Elizabeth the second. Her daughter, yeah. But she would rule only 20 years. And finally, her grandson, Prince William, will take the throne instead of Charles III. And he would be replaced in 2026. Since people love Port Since people love Ronaldo, Ronaldo will take the throne in 2026 after his final World Cup. So that's it. From William the Conqueror until to Ronaldo, who who is gonna be named King Ronaldo the First if I were about to be king. Anyways, that's all.